From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Welcome everybody to another Thursday at 3. I'm glad to see so many people here. We have a real treat in store for us today. I was familiar with Casey Gardner's work before I actually met her at Codex, but meeting her at Codex just sealed the deal. She's not only does she do smart, creative, accessible books, artist books or press books, she has a sense of humor, a political viewpoint, a design aesthetic that's sometimes Jetsons, sometimes mid-century, sometimes modern. All of that happens in 5 minutes of a conversation with her. And we're going to get even more of that from her today. So I'm really thrilled to have Casey come all the way from Berkeley to share some of her insights about her books and what she's doing with them. We have some of her materials, as we usually do, on the table. And afterwards, we'll be happy to show them to you. And you can feel free to ask Casey whatever questions you would like. Casey asked me to have you remind her that if she turns to you and freezes, someone just needs to yell, "Breathe." And with that as a way of introducing Casey Gardner.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much. All right, so I have a talk written, and I will try not to read it, but chances are I'll be reading it, but it's written from the heart. So, all right, so this is a model of the beginning of our universe that was 13.8 billion years ago. To me, this image is pure visual poetry. According to this model, everything that exists in our universe, every star and planet that composes us and our lives, all matter was within an infinitely tiny single point, a so-called singularity. Then all that energy suddenly expanded into the void and inflated, opening up space and eventually coalescing into galaxies, everything. I'm moved by all these forces, conspiring to a time and a space where our lives are possible. Science and art have intersections. Both are trying to understand how and why we are here. Nothing, even the Big Bang, is conclusive. So I have a story for you, and I'm telling you this story because it happened here in DC, and because it marks the beginning of my long, slow journey to becoming an artist, and because it also explains part of my psyche. So, one day, I was walking down Pennsylvania Avenue with thousands of other enthusiastic, ardent, vociferously enraged people. The streets were barricaded. It was 1992, and Planned Parenthood versus Casey was before the Supreme Court. The provisions of Roe v. Wade were being challenged. We marchers were voicing our support for women's reproductive rights. I was there with my family and friends and a zillion of my mother's activist friends. We made our way down Pennsylvania Avenue, and I listened to my mother regale those around her with a story of her own pre-Roe v. Wade desperation. It was the early 60s. She'd had her first baby at 18, and the next one came 11 months later. Now, at 20, the third was on its way. Things were not good at home, and this one-time high school student librarian was feeling lost in despair, wretchedly stupid in finding herself pregnant again. She desperately did not want another child. Telling this tale years later on Pennsylvania Avenue, my mother has many years as a political activist and feminist under her belt, and she warms to her account illustrating the plight of all women. She dramatically and graphically discloses the various acts she was forced to resort to in attempts to abort her unwanted fetus. When she finally scraped together the means to pay for a back-alley abortion, a very risky procedure in those days, she was too far along for the pregnancy to be terminated. We marchers all listened, spellbound in righteous outrage, as we walked on the pavement lifting our pro-choice signs. In that moment, I did a bit of calculation. I was her third child, and it dawned on me that I was the one in her belly. That moment on Pennsylvania Avenue was a crisis for me, not just in the political and personal sense, but of my very existence. I marched along trying to reconcile my support of freedom and choice, knowing it meant I would not exist. Eventually, I came into the world at Georgetown University Hospital as Casey Sullivan. And so yes, I'm very happy to be here today, alive in this world, with all its precariousness and where something can be created from nothing. So after I was born here, my family moved to Columbia, Maryland, and when I was 10, we moved to Aspen, Colorado. And there in the public school system, I was in a program that took us into the wilderness, so I didn't spend that much time in the classroom, but I learned a lot of mountaineering skills, and I spent a lot of time sleeping under the stars. So the mountains really came to define me there. And after that, I lived in Colorado until I was 35, and then I moved to California, and now I live in Berkeley, about 50 yards from a major fault line. In preparing this talk, I identified 6 words that guide me in my work. They are feeling, beauty, matter, motion, wonder, and my favorite word in the human language, why. These words motivate all my work, but for this talk, I'll highlight them one at a time with examples of my books. For my first 2 words come from this quote by the photographer Dorothea Lange. She found beauty and dignity in the faces of people in the Depression. This sits on the windowsill of my studio. My books usually take a year or 2 to make, so before I embark on a project, I have to make sure I feel deeply about it. What drives my interest is certainly intellectual, but the emotional undercurrents and their mystery really propel my work. And so my first word is feeling. Feeling plays a role throughout making the work. I'm working along on my trajectory, and it comes out of nowhere, a feeling comes. I try to ignore it. It's vague, uncertain, outlandish. But it whispers, what if you tried this? What if this actually means that? And I think, but that's a whole new door to go through. I had no intention of going there. I didn't even know such a door was possible or even existed. And I try to continue on my course. Feeling is totally irrational. It's not interested in being efficient or being the direct course. I think feeling comes from the space where the body and the mind meet. Maybe we call it instinct or intuition. So eventually, I listen to it, and I open the door. This is my most recent book. I finished it in February. It's called The Gravity Series. These 3 books, all of my books are letterpress printed, so I don't need to repeat that. These 3 books are cloth bound, and they're suspended by magnets in the carrying case. In many ways, this is my most personal book in that I opened up my own experiences to investigate my topic, gravity. This series of books reckons with gravity as a universal and yet very personal phenomenon, holding everything in perpetual motion and relationship. Each of these books uses gravity as a metaphor for love, in terms of falling, climbing, and orbiting. So finely tuned is gravity that if its quantity had been even infinitesimally altered, our universe as we know it could not have emerged and life would not exist. This fine tuning can actually be calculated, cosmologists and physicists calculate it to 10 to the minus 122. I'm thinking that's 122 zeros, right? That's just, it's incredible how finely tuned the workings of our universe are. Though gravity is the weakest of the 4 universal forces, it's strong enough to hold galaxies together and precise enough to give each one of us weight and be held here on Earth. Each book explores how we live with influences we cannot always control but rely upon, forces that we cannot see but feel. What is this unseen power that, like love, is vital to life? I'll take you through each of the 3 books. I'm starting with this one, All There Is, because it's how the whole series started. I was trying to think one day about what I could believe in unequivocally, what really truly existed. And I came to gravity, and I thought, that's all there is. That's all there is. That's all there is. And I just thought, I loved how it could be, that's all there is, and that's all there is, gravity. So that was the beginning of this project. This book in particular is about climbing. It's also about trust and finding your own center of gravity as you move your weight upward on rock. Meanwhile, you're putting your life in the hands of your climbing partner who's belaying you, trusting that person with your weight. So this spread is about a crux of a climb. And I wanted to say, so climbing, I don't know if there's any climbers here. There's a spelunker here.
Caver.
A caver. Oh, that's a difference.
Cavers rescue spelunkers.
So
Sorry.
I could never be a caver, but I tried it. So anyway, when you're climbing, a crux of a climb is the most difficult part of a climb, and there's slab climbing. And when you're on a slab, you are relying on friction to sort of get you to move. And the best way to move is to sort of, instead of clinging to the rock, to pull away from the rock. And that gives puts the anchor into your feet. So you're sort of finding your way through gravity, and it's a little bit counterintuitive. And I think in all these different ways, like right now, we're all having this relationship with the center of the earth. We have our own relationship with the earth and gravity, through gravity. And in these sports, whether it's skiing or climbing or surfing, I have less of a good relationship with gravity. We're finding out where our own centers are, and that's happening all the time, and I just think that's fascinating. It's about being in the center of the earth, and so all the time we're in gravity, and this relationship with, supposedly, everything in the universe has a relationship with everything else that has mass through gravity. I just love this stuff. So these figures, just a little bit on process, I drew with a brush and ink, and then I scanned them into my computer. And anything that I can draw, I can scan into my computer and create into a plate to print. At the end of the book is a map of a climb I did with a partner. We grappled with risk and trust, and here I printed some of the words marking our route as we were tethered together. The next book is How to Fall. It's about falling in love. I don't know, can you guys read that? Okay. One day I was living my perfectly lovely life and working in a bookstore when someone walked through the door and I fell for him. And I eventually fell out of line, fell to my knees, and my lovely life fell to the wayside. When I was 18, I married a professional ski racer. Now at 28, I didn't think I was looking to fall for anyone, but well, I fell head over heels. I fell from grace. Things fell apart, but mostly I fell in love. Eventually my life fell back together, but that's a different book. How do we live with these unseen forces that influence our lives? Sometimes the line between flying and falling isn't clear. A Star Close Enough is about orbiting. This book includes a vowel which spins through the various points and paths of two bodies orbiting each other in relationship. You guys know what a vowel is, right? This is a sophisticated audience. The opening page of the book, the verso, left page, reads, "Speaking of space as lovers do." Then on the recto, it reads, "He says nothing's sacred anymore. She says everything is. He says same thing." In orbits, two mutually attracted bodies revolve around a joint center of mass, located in the space between them. In relationships, two bodies move closer together and further apart as they mediate their distance, creating their own orbit. Meanwhile, our Earth is gravitationally bound in the most propitious orbit around our sun, making it just the right distance to receive its life-giving energy. Often I feel super unsophisticated because of my sense of wonder. So here I'm writing this grandiloquent poem, speaking to a guy about how fantastic everything is, how amazing it is that the world even exists, and that the sun is so perfectly situated for us to make peach pie. And he's exasperated. Now I'll move on to my next word, beauty. So Lang's phrase is, "Beauty appears when one feels deeply." I come to book art through my love of books. They have made me who I am. Without books, without libraries, I would have been lost. Growing up, I was an avid reader. In books, I learned to see the world. From this book, Harriet the Spy, I discovered a way of looking and relating to the world around me. From this book, I learned to keep a journal, which was the beginning of my writing life. I learned about imagination and possibility from books, how whole worlds could be created in pages. I also learned about beauty from books. I remember spending a lot of time gazing at the covers of books. I would imagine entering into the realms they illustrated. I still have a few of my childhood books. You can tell, look at the price on that. This is one of my very favorites, and the cover remains in my imagination. Much of my sense of beauty comes from those magical moments gazing into books. I made this book, Cartographical Incantations, in 2015. Its pages are letterpress and digitally printed, and it's bound into an accordion structure. Structure, that's a toughie for me. Structure, okay. I also find beauty in maps, globes, and atlases. In a public library in Amsterdam, up several flights of stairs, I found a treasure trove of atlases. I was in heaven. One book held 17th century maps from the seafaring Dutch explorers and merchants. I snapped some photos from my phone, and later I used these images in these books. I only had fragments of the maps. I put them into Adobe Illustrator, and because I was thinking about hinges at the time, I reflected them, and I found that I could make shapes with them. Each spread has on the verso a history of cartography, starting with the map from the 7th century BC Babylonians. This spread shows a medieval TO map. Then on the right is a poem, an incantation I wrote about taking journeys or finding your way in the world. As I played with the maps, beauty again appeared. I found I could create patterns. My books always have various narrative routes or pathways, offering the reader opportunities to chart their own course through the pages. Here on the left, verso, is the instruction in using a compass in the wilderness. On the right is an incantation. I'll read it. Wayfarer's incantation for finding your space. Here you are, still you are here. Here you are, still. Are you still here? You are still here. Do not abandon yourself. The other side of the folios is this narrative, another narrative pathway. It's a traveler's tale of chance and choice. Those words, chance and choice, come up a lot in my books. Chance. This reads, perhaps you were given a map, perhaps not. This line reads, perhaps that is you disappearing down the stairway and into the dark, your feet echoing off the glistening road. A few years earlier, in Matter, Antimatter, and so forth, I'd written this line, just that one sentence, and I always wondered where that came from. So here in this book, I wrote a story about it. This map forms the shape of our entrance into the world. It reads, just to see what might happen. My next word is matter. I'm thinking about this word all the time. Not just in terms of what is significant, meaning what matters, but what has meaning. Also in the cosmological aspect of matter transforming into energy and energy transforming into matter. It was making this book, Matter, Antimatter, and so forth, in 2013, that I learned that matter and energy were interchangeable. I remember walking down the street one day and I realized I was looking at the world and existence in a radically different way. Before making this book, my foundations of reality were mostly philosophical. In researching this book, studying quantum physics, what I could understand of it, and astrophysics, my sense of life on Earth became more objectively elemental. The title of this book refers to a time soon after the Big Bang when a small preponderance of matter over antimatter was produced. None of the physicists understands where this asymmetry comes from. I found that out from my neighbor. So a year ago, a particle physicist moved in next door. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. She does tons of research. She researches gluons. And so sorting our recycling, we might be talking about gluons and how let's see, the gluons are actually using the strong nuclear force to hold the atom together. So yeah, I learned that from her, gluons. Okay, yay Berkeley. Without this asymmetry, matter and antimatter would have continued to annihilate each other, and nothing could have emerged. This book is a series of 7 folios wrapped in a map of the universe. The folios follow the story of 2 travelers in space. One traveler from Earth is on a quest for what truly matters in the universe. Along the way, she meets a character from outer space. He is looking for a new dimension that can only be revealed to him by an Earthling. We follow their journey as they move through various realms of cosmic discovery. Each folio has a focus of investigation. This slide shows the folios of science, constellations, and light. The layered transparencies are intergalactic artifacts from the transparent universe. This represents a time after the Big Bang when the universe was transparent and light could move freely. And for these images I took, they were photos from the Monterey Aquarium. They looked sort of cosmic. So yeah, those are like jellyfish in there. I love aquariums too. I was in the Natural History Museum yesterday. Here the time folio is on the left and the gravity folio is on the right. There's a moment in the time folio where the 2 characters find themselves in the interstitial interstellar cafe. Here they share coffee with luminaries plucked from divergent historical and literary eras. So Galileo chats with Van Gogh, and Machiavelli meets Rosa Parks. On the back of each folio is a mission dispatch. This gave me space to write what I was learning of the natural forces and phenomena of the cosmos. There's a story in the Infinity folio where the character says she sees a sculpture and she asks, it's an infinity sculpture. She asks her mother what it is, and her mother replies, love. This actually is a memory I had from being outside of the Air and Space Museum. So when I was growing up, there was an infinity sculpture, and it was silver, and it spun around slowly. It's still there because I was there yesterday, and I thought, did infinity become obsolete? It wasn't there. No, I mean, so I remember, so I said the 3 of us kids were there, and we asked my mom what infinity was. So parents must have these amazing moments. And so my mom goes, something that lasts forever, and we're like, what lasts forever? And so she said love. So I thought that was, and that stayed with me. But I did look for that sculpture yesterday, and maybe I just didn't go in the right entrance. And then I stood in front of the Gemini and Mercury capsules. Oh my gosh, I wept. For some reason, they were very moving to me, thinking of humans in those. So meanwhile, so when I heard I was going to do this talk, I asked my mother to send me pictures of us kids in DC when we were young, and she sent this gem. So I'm pretty sure that this is the infinity sculpture. That's the plinth in any case. So we loved going to the Smithsonian when I was growing up. My mother took us often. So we always called it the Smithsonian, but it's like now it's this whole constellations of museums. And for me, it was the Air and Space Museum and the Natural History Museum. That's where we went. So that's my brother John in the chucks, my sister in the red dress, and that's me not liking my shoes in the white tights. I'm pretty sure that's why I have that look on my face. Because it was just total joy going to the Smithsonian. So this might be a good time. I can show you a little bit about how I make books. This is my printing studio. It's a 10 by 12 foot shed that's in our backyard. So I live like close to the Berkeley campus. My husband's a professor of economics at Berkeley. I keep saying we, and so I thought I'd give you the other part of the we. So you can see my Vandercook. It's a Vandercook 4. Vandercooks were printing presses that newspapers used for proofing. This one is from the 1950s. And in the back, there's a type cabinet with wood and metal type. There's a furniture cabinet. And here is a book press, because I also do binding in there, not just printing. This is a picture of casing in all there is. And I make tons of notes when I'm doing production, because I don't seem to think when I'm in production. And so this one, you can see I have north, north. All this north stuff, it's because there's 18 magnets in that book. And I had to keep the polarities of north, south straight all the time. And then I'm just constantly, I just go into a different mode in production, and so I just have notes all, don't do that, be careful. And a lot of the, what I do is in my body, memory. I don't seem to be rational when I'm binding books, even though it's super, for all the different bindings, it takes a lot of maquettes to figure out how the materials interact. This is a gratifying moment. So this is part of the edition of the Gravity series. Usually my editions are 30 to 50, and this is probably maybe like 20 or something. So I just, when I took that picture, it was a really nice feeling. So, but I like production. Some people, they don't do all their books when they don't produce all their books after they get finished with them, but I do because of the body memory. I couldn't, like Julie Chen keeps notes of everything, and then when she needs a book, she makes it. I don't think I could do that, really. So, but she's Julie Chen. This is the other place where I do my work. This is inside of our house. This is where I write, draw, work on the computer, make maquettes, carve linoleum, cut paper, do everything, print digitally. Does everyone know how plates are made? Anything that you can put into the computers, whether if you draw something, you can scan it, put it into the computer, and then you can make a file that gets created into a negative, and then the negative gets placed on polymer, and where the light shines through, the polymer rises up so that you can create a relief plate. So anything that I can draw or create, like created in design, can be made into a plate.
So that includes the figures of the climbers?
Yes, yes, exactly. So those were done in brush, in ink, 50,000 of them until I found the ones that I liked, and then I scanned them in and then turned them into a vector file so that it's a true black. And then that gets turned into a negative, and then where the where the white light can get through. Photopolymer.
Because they look like lino cuts.
Oh yeah, I do lino cuts too. A lot of the printing in How to Fall is lino cut. All of it, basically. Yeah, in fact, when you saw back there, that's a piece of linoleum on my press. That's yeah, you can see that. I really like linoleum. That's kind of a new thing in the past couple years for me.
That was the American History Museum.
Thank you. I like that one. The American History Museum?
Yeah.
Didn't it say art and technology, or?
It's too early anyways. Look, October 1968.
Right.
Air and Space was in the 70s.
Is that true? Right on. But I must have gone to, okay. Thank God you're here. Verisimilitude's everything to me. I don't want to lead you guys astray. So one more thing I wanted to say about this room. In the middle of the slide, next to the periodic table of elements, is the model for my book, Body of Inquiry, the anatomical model. So I'll talk about that book later. This is an example of how I begin my work. It's such a perfect example of my brain. So actually, it would be more, if it were my brain, it wouldn't be written like that. In fact, I have stuff like that. So what happens is I'll be reading books and I just take notes, and that way I can sort of pay attention to what interests me and then see relationships. And all throughout the process that I'm working, I'm constantly doing this, because I might be just trying to write like 2 lines, and then I start reading about it, and then it ends up being, like this big, and I usually take really big pieces of paper and yeah, to find words. Words. This is an example of a sketch. This is a project that for a print I did called The Multiverse Baedekers. And at this point when I'm sketching, it's pretty fun because I don't have to make much sense. It's a weird thing because it's a fun moment because it's really free, but at the same time I don't really know where I'm going, so there's this little bit of like, whoa, whoa, like speaking of not really knowing where you are in gravity. So that's what that looks like. My next word is motion. One of the things I love about printmaking is the constant motion. Sometimes the rhythm of working on the press feels like a dance. Also, because books are physical objects, I like to consider the reader being in motion as they move through my books. I'm drawn to images of women as trees. When I saw Bernini's 17th century marble sculpture of Daphne and Apollo in the Borghese Gallery in Rome, I stood staring at it for a very long time. I was trying to see and feel how he made marble into flesh, and then see the precise moment when the flesh became bark. I was wondering at such beauty, baroque and elegant, for such a tragic fate. For decades, I've been collecting images of women as trees. For a person who loves freedom and motion as much as I do, I'm confounded by my interest in something rooted. I made this book, Threshold, in 2012. It's about moving through transformation and creating change. The cover of the book is a poem about thresholds, marking passage, the framework of conception, on the verge of where the end becomes the beginning. It is shaped like a doorway to open. The form and content of this book are closely related, relying on each other for meaning. I used a Turkish mapfold so that when the book opens, Daphne's hand opens in the midst of leafing and reaching for the sky. In Ovid's Metamorphosis, we read the nymph Daphne's passion was to run free in the forest and hunt. Then she becomes hunted herself. She flees to escape being ravaged by Apollo. She runs to the river's edge and cries out, "Change me." And the god of the river turns her into a tree, rooted forever in place. I read many translations of this tale, but I couldn't figure out why a tree. I do love trees, but it didn't seem an apt metamorphosis for someone like Daphne. So for this book, I wrote my own version of Daphne's story. Her determination to remain free is inspiring, yet her call for change has an unexpected outcome, as do many thresholds we cross. The reader is asked to put the book in motion, turning it in order to read it. Turning the book and looking at the alcoves, the reader moves in time from day with the sun and into night with the moon. Turning to read each of the four corners, which I considered north, south, east, and west, you find the four metamuses of flux. I made up Greek names for them. You started that. This is my 4th and 5th grade teacher from Columbia, Maryland, John Sullivan. And he's the one to whom the book Body of Inquiry is dedicated to, because I think I learned a lot about curiosity from him. But I remember you were the one who introduced to us about Greek roots. Thank you. So each one of these has a Greek name, and Euthalia here in the corner on the left is about vision and ideas. She's in flight. I like the last line where it says she is bold and her bones are light. The next muse on the right is Eupraxia. She's about planning and calculating and realizing where ideas intersect with reality in the material world. Then the next muse on the left is Eutropia, trope meaning change. She is about the meandering path of experimenting and how responding to the twists and turns can form a surprising path. Finally, the muse on the right is Euphemia, where everything comes together and the whole begins anew, so the book keeps turning. The border around the book is printed with the phrase, "There is no fixed self. We are all perpetually in motion in our daily lives, on our planet, through the cosmos, at the atomic and subatomic level. We are essentially motion. Change is constant, and there is no fixed self." The next word is wonder. The word wonder can go in a few different directions. It can be about curiosity, it can be a happy awe of gratitude, and it can be dumbfounded incredulity. In current events, I find myself often in this last state. I made this book, Hearsay, in 2012 with my friend and former teacher, Nance O'Banion. I'd like to take a quick look at this book because though I made it 5 years ago, it's come alive to me in a new way with our current political environment. This book is about locating where we are in a landscape of truth and lie. It's about communication and how we orient ourselves in variable and interacting contexts. The book opens to a map with a spectrum of truth to half-truth down the side, and a spectrum of half-truth to lie printed along the bottom. The object is to see what happens at the intersecting points. The magnetized ear-shaped structure holds vowels spinning with the variables of how one hears and listens, depending on the shifting factors of who, what, where, when, how, and why. Turning the 4 different vowels creates different readings and offers many interpretations of what we consider true. This is an early vowel. I just liked it. I saw it at the MSU library, and I thought I'd show it to you. I really like vowels. They offer a dynamic way of creating choice and chance in a book. I just slid this image in at the last minute. It's a piece that I'm hoping to finish in the next few weeks. It's a project for my multiverse Baedekers. The yellow and green print on the right is a map of the Big Bang. I'm still working on that print. But it has a caption that's complete. It fits with this theme of truth and wonder. It reads, "What else might be true?" which works for me in a cosmological sense and also in this time of befuddling political discourse. My last word is why. Moving on. This will be my final books, brings me to why, my favorite word. I've come to believe this is the most important word that defines humans and makes us uniquely creative. Books are a place not only where we can go to answer questions, but for me, I've found in books a way to ask questions. I made Why Go in 2010. It's the last book I made as an art student at the California College of the Arts. It's about when I went into the world alone. In the chronology of my life, it follows How to Fall. It took me a year of working 2 jobs to save up for this trip. I left my little town and flew into the Pacific. First, I rode my bike around the islands of New Zealand. Then I lived in a commune there for a few months learning about farming and permaculture. Then into Indonesia and Southeast Asia, where I found a monastery in Thailand to learn about Buddhism. Then I traveled for several months in Vietnam, Egypt, Israel, then home. When I got home, I picked up my life where I left it. It wasn't until years later that I had time to ask myself what it was I was looking for in the world, out there in the world. Still figuring that out. But what I can tell you is that I found my voice in making this book. In that, my books could be questions. So this is the book that Betsy Davids was my thesis advisor on. Yeah, so do you guys know Betsy Davids? She was a wonderful teacher of book art for me. I made Body of Inquiry in 2011. It's the first book I made out of art school. The subject of this book is the anatomical model that you saw. She inspired me to explore the science and mystery of life. I began first by reading about her organs and how the body works. Biology soon led to physics, and from physics, it's a short leap into the cosmos. I ordered her from an Edmunds scientific catalog. Mail ordered her. So that tells you how long I've had her. So for over 20 years, she sat on various bookshelves of my life. Sometimes she's intact, the carapace of her skin on, but mostly she's open, her organs in various places around my studio. She maintains a particular sang-froid, looking in the distance, never ruffled, always a small smile, and every hair in place. So my husband's French, and I've said that word wrong for a lot of sang-froid, because I've always said it the way I would think to say it. Sometimes he corrects me. She told me she holds something transcendent and secret despite her openness and accessibility. Over the years, I've referred to her as Our Lady of Serene Evisceration. There is something remote and sacred, yet incredibly exposed and vulnerable about her. I'd begun this book, but I hadn't settled on a structure. I wasn't sure what kind of space to put her in. But then I was in Paris and I saw this image of Mary at the Cluny. Not the image, the actual, didn't see the image, it was actually that. That's the great thing about museums. So this inspired the triptych structure. I didn't know what kind of space to put her in, and so I realized that was just a big moment of understanding that. I was thinking, does she want to be in the forest? Where is she going to live? So that was nice seeing that. This is the other side of the book. The instruments on the outer panels are from 19th and early 20th century scientific catalogs that I found in the Doe Library at UC Berkeley. These early laboratory instruments represent our endeavors to measure and quantify and our quest to understand things that cannot be readily apprehended by the senses. The large panels explore atoms, cells, and genetic structure. The interior codex tells the story of my anatomical model and investigates the permeable borderline between material and immaterial in our bodies and in our life. These parts of the body are all cut by hand. The more resolved something is, the longer the trail of failures and experiments behind it. I wanted the organs to be accurate and also happy to be moved through and read. I didn't want the reader to think that it was too delicate for their hands to open. I enjoyed pairing the actual functioning of the organs with metaphor. Here the heart opens. It is the body, after all, that keeps us here on Earth, the perfect distance from our star, on a remote edge of the Milky Way, one of 200 billion galaxies in our universe. Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Is this time for Casey to take a few questions?
I answered everything in my paper. Yeah.
Do you have one of those machines where you do the polymer plates and you send stuff out, or how does that?
There's different, like sometimes schools have them and I can access them, or now the San Francisco Center of the Book has one. But usually I'm really, like getting over to San Francisco is hell now. So now I just send them out to Boxcar. But I'm going to be having a fellowship at Kala, and they have a plate maker. So it'll be kind of fun to be able to have that kind of instant gratification instead of a week later I get the plate back. So yeah.
And do you leave that to images only, or is some of your curved typography also being done with polymer plates?
Yeah, that's all polymer. Yeah, and so like in that, like some of that's my handwriting in there. All my books have something where I don't know I can do something, and so I want to experiment with it in the book. And that was like, for some reason, handwriting, mixing handwriting and typography, because I really love typography. That's a big interest of mine. So I wanted to see how I could mix my handwriting with typography, and so that was one of the trajectories of that book. Yeah.
Just for chuckles, there used to be a time when if you wanted, you could have type high, your signature type high carved out of wood.
Oh yeah, I
And
can
I have a
imagine
couple
that
of them.
happening. Yeah, and I can print on wood if I make it type high. Yeah, a wood plate, because linoleum or wood, anything that I can make into relief and make it .918, I can print on. Yeah.
Is that your artwork?
It is. So the San Francisco Center for the Book asked me to do a linoleum print for their steamroller printing. So that's a 3 foot by 3 foot. This is the carving of the linoleum, and so they lay the linoleum on the street outside of the San Francisco Center of the Book, and a big steamroller comes along. They put a piece of beautiful Reeves BFK down on it, and the steamroller comes along and prints it.
Dampen the paper?
Yeah, they dampen the paper, and then they have, like all these people with big ink rollers, kneeling down on the street.
So it wasn't on wood, it was just the lino.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it had a little flexibility.
Good point. Yeah, good point. And they came out really well. I wish I had one of those prints. It was a fundraiser, so I didn't get any, but
So that was a lot of carving.
it was a lot of carving. But my friend Macy Chadwick came over and helped me do some of the carving. Yeah. So that was what really got me into doing linoleum. Like, I'd known how to do linoleum, but I'd never really done that much of it. And so after that, I started using linoleum more. That was a couple years ago. Yeah. So then this is, let me see. So that's it, just like after they printed it, they hung it up on the outside of the things to let it dry. So that you can see, it's like they have these nice little hand things. So yeah, that was it. That's when I saw it for the first time. I was like, oh, it worked out. But I really love, I mean, you can see what I'm doing with the woman in trees. I'm trying to get her in motion and also have her rooted. And down in here in the roots, it says, oh, yes.
Yeah, there's
So,
no white spots either.
No, they know what they're doing. They're not messing around. They have some good printers at the San Francisco Center for the Book. The guy's name is Chad, and he's just totally into it that day. Yeah, so it's actually going on, I think, the one for this year and the next week. Yeah. Big steamroller. John?
When did you start learning to write? You want to tell the class that you were here how you used to sign your name?
Oh, I did. I was thinking about that. So when I was in 4th and 5th grade, I used to...
And the other teachers wanted me to beat her daily. And I just saw something, and I said, I'm just going to let her go.
So I signed my name Casey, and there was an exclamation point, a smiley face, and a star. And I never signed my name without that. Like for years. It didn't really translate when I moved to Colorado. I tried it for a while, but it didn't have the same resonance because I didn't have a teacher like you. But yeah, so Casey, I should try that again. Me and then Lori Martin, I tried to get her into it too.
On your business card.
Yeah, Casey, exclamation point, smiley face, star.
I think we take you really seriously.
Yeah, well, luckily I don't have to, now I can just say, oh, I'm an artist, you don't have to take me seriously. I have such impunity with that, so, yeah. Anything else?
Well, would everyone join me in thanking Casey once again for today?
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.